Welcome back to Already Gone on YouTube. One of the things I intend to do with this channel is highlight some of the cases that might not get a full spot in the Already Gone playlist. Many historic cases fall under that umbrella, and today we're looking at the 1955 murder of 7-year-old Barbara Gaca from Detroit. Now, there are cases where the community really rallies around them. Everybody's interested, like JonBenet Ramsey, Kaylee Anthony, Natalie Holloway. This case, Barbara's disappearance, was one of those cases where everybody was interested. And reading about Barbara really reminds me of my own family. We were Catholic, like Barbara's family, and my aunt was the oldest with a younger brother and a younger sister at home, and she walked to school, to a parochial school. And I can just picture her in a white blouse and a little plaid skirt and a pair of knee socks with her hair like in a ponytail, tied with a ribbon. Now, Barbara lived in Detroit, and in Detroit you would see these kids headed to the local parochial school. Barbara didn't wear a uniform, but she did have nuns and was working on her first communion at the time that she disappeared. And also my uncle would tell you that the stereotype of the mean nun with the ruler and yelling at them, that was based in reality, but that's a story for another day. I want you to see 7-year-old Barbara. Here's a photo of her. And she's the oldest of the 3 kids. She's really excited about her first communion, and each day she comes home from school to have lunch, and while they eat lunch they watch Soupy Sales. And if you're not familiar with Soupy Sales, here's a picture of him to give you an idea of the sort of kids programming they were watching. I know that when my uncle was little, he used to ask his mom to match whatever soup Soupy was having. It was a big deal. But Barbara doesn't come home from lunch. She's not there. Mom calls the school, who says, well, she never made it to school. We haven't even seen her today, which means Barbara didn't arrive at school that morning. She's been missing for hours at this point, and nobody knew it. So Rita's daughter is missing, and it's 1955, so getting her husband on the phone at the post office is not easy like it would be today. She's also got the 2 small kids at home with her, which hinders her ability to get out there and search and look. Her neighborhood where Barbara lived is near Gratiot and McNichols, and within minutes there are dozens of police officers scouring the area. The word spreads among the neighbors. They come out and look. Everybody wants to help. On the morning of March 24th, 1955, Barbara left their family home at 14102 Faircrest. She was going to walk the 5 blocks to the Assumption Grotto Church School, which I have a picture of here. And this was not a long or treacherous walk. I know that when I was 7, I was walking a little further to get to my own elementary school. And we have a map here of the school that you can look at, the trip that she made down the street and then down Gratiot to get to school. Now, when she left home that morning, she was wearing a dress beneath a blue snowsuit. And her mother, who wanted to keep her warm because it was a pretty cold morning, put a little babushka around her head. And it had a floral print on it. So she's all bundled up and she's going to school, but she didn't make it. Somebody got hold of her between her home and the school on that 5 blocks. One of Barbara's classmates, so another 7-year-old, comes forward and says, hey, I saw Barbara. It was at the corner of Lyndhurst and Gratiot. Lyndhurst and Gratiot is about a block south of where Barbara lives. And the boy says that Barbara told him that she was waiting for someone. This was between Lyndhurst and Maple Ridge that she must have been picked up. And right along Gratiot, Gratiot's a really busy road. Think of, like, today it's an 8-lane boulevard with businesses along it for miles and miles. It was really a major artery back in the 1950s as well. So the next day, Friday, the community's just overrun with searchers, both police and volunteers. Everybody's out looking for Barbara. Later the day and that weekend, hundreds of Boy Scouts turn out. They want to help in the search, so they're literally beating the bushes, checking yards, knocking on doors, asking people if they've seen Barbara. On Saturday the 26th, now this was interesting to me. I have a journalism background, so I love newspapers and old newspapers. I think it's really cool. But the Detroit Free Press, they published a special edition of the newspaper, and it was specifically to feature Barbara's photo. And in the newspaper on the cover is a window that explains why everyone, even non-subscribers, receive this issue. And I'm going to let you have a look at that here. So this sticks out to me. You hear about a missing child and you see people stepping up to search or donating water, donating meals to searchers and family. The newspaper running extra issues hoping to bring Barbara home. I can't think of a 21st century equivalent to the size and expense of this gesture. Today, the street where Barbara lived with her family is dotted with vacant lots and burned out homes. I don't think Barbara's house still exists. But again, they're out searching. We have all these volunteers. They're knocking on doors. They're searching garages and dumpsters and parked cars and playgrounds. They're really hoping to find her. But the person who kidnapped Barbara, he took her a long way from home, out to Halstead Road near Pontiac Trail. Now, I grew up in the Detroit area, so I know both where she disappeared from and where she was found. I used to live off of Halstead Road. This was out in the country. We are talking 28 miles as the crow flies from where she was kidnapped to where she was found. And back then, like if you look at it now on a map, there's freeways that take you out there a lot faster, but in 1955 it was all surface streets, and some of those surface streets weren't paved, so this really was out in the country. Today, the West Bloomfield Trail runs through that area and people run and jog, but back then in the 50s it was a functioning railroad line. So railroad cars, trains would be riding through that area all the time, and the area was very familiar to people who worked along the railroad or worked for the railroad as an engineer, or what have you. I also believe that even when she was found at like Halstead between Maple and Pontiac Trail. I think Halstead Road now takes a different path. So if you look at this image, then I can show you where she was found. And then you look at an image of what the area looks like now, the roads don't line up. I think the roads have changed in the last almost 70 years. So she was found by the railroad tracks, and it was a railroad worker who found her on Thursday, March 31st, 1955. So she was missing about a week. Unfortunately, Barbara had been raped. She'd been stabbed and left on her back with her little eyes closed, her knees were bent, her arms were by her sides, and she'd been wrapped in a green army blanket. Now, she was found in West Bloomfield Township, or West Bloomfield, which was a little tiny community back then. It existed, it was a real community, but it was small, it was rural, and both the Michigan State Police and Detroit Police were like, hey, we will take this case, we will investigate it, and West Bloomfield said, no thank you, we got it. And they still have the case. Also, back then in 1955, we did not protect crime scenes. I've got this great picture I can show you from the Detroit Free Press, and it shows a detective holding up Barbara's rosary. Now, we would have held on to that and DNA tested it. Somebody touched it, get the touch DNA and get that to the lab. But back then, none of that was a consideration. And they actually had some really, by today's standards, tacky photos of Barbara at the crime scene, like her little wrapped up body. I'm not sharing that because nobody should look at that. Police, even though West Bloomfield was working it, both Detroit and the Michigan State Police started rounding up suspects. Anybody who attacked, assaulted, threatened a child, they were brought in and they were looked at in Barbara's case. They wanted to see if this was someone who could have hurt little Barbara, sweet little Barbara. But Barbara was not the only little girl murdered in Michigan in 1955. Just a few weeks after Barbara's death, in late May, on the other side of the state in Kalamazoo, 8-year-old Jeannie Singleton. She was taken while walking home from school, and Jeannie, and I've got a photo of her right here, she walked with a limp because she'd battled rheumatic fever when she was younger, and Jeannie was a sweet little girl. Her parents had to remind her, don't talk to strangers, you can't do that, it's not safe. But Jeannie was picked up, and her body was found 9 days later, and it was pretty badly decomposed. They think that she was kidnapped and murdered on the same day, but like Barbara, she was sexually assaulted and murdered. Her body was found by a group of kids who were out playing hide and seek. And like Barbara's case, Jeannie's case is not solved. So we've got 2 little girls murdered in Michigan in 1955. Neither case was resolved. Today, Barbara's case is still held by the West Bloomfield Police. They keep it open, and even though it's been 70 years, I think they'd still hope somebody will come forward and say something and reveal something. At the time, they chased down a lot of leads. They looked at a lot of suspects, but not one of them led to an arrest. I highly recommend, and I put a link in the comments, the Our Detroit article from 2009. It interviews her family. It's a great, great look at Barbara's case, and I hope you'll take the time to read it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about some of the suspects they looked at. Like I said, they talked to a lot of local creepers, anybody who got in trouble for assaulting, molesting, threatening, menacing a kid. They looked at them as a possible suspect in the murder. But they also looked at, and really didn't get to spend a lot of time with, a visiting priest at the Assumption Grotto Catholic Church. This priest was supposedly shipped off to Canada almost immediately after Barbara's body was found. And we've learned over the years that the church can and will protect priests that commit terrible crimes. In fact, right now in Oakland County, Michigan, a priest that was formerly posted to Our Lady of Sorrows Church in Farmington, Michigan, he is awaiting trial for the sexual assault of children back in the 1970s. Unfortunately, COVID has prevented his trial from moving forward. It's been 70 years since Barbara was murdered, and they've looked at a lot of suspects. They've run down a lot of leads and tips, but no one was ever arrested or charged in her case. And that's the same with Jeannie's case. And again, it's been 70 years. If the killer or killers are still alive, they'd be in their 90s. So I don't think we're going to see an arrest or conviction in these cases anytime. It's kind of between them and God at this point. I think that wraps up our story. If you wouldn't mind, like, rate, subscribe, whatever it is you're supposed to do on YouTube, do that. And keep an eye out for my cocktail videos, little quarantinis that are easy for you to make at home. I'm trying to alternate the true crime content with the quarantini content. So thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.